There are very few places in this city where I can sit without being something. At the Merino Group, I am the name on the building. At the clubs and restaurants that orbit my world, I am the table that doesn't appear in the reservation system, and the car at the curb that the staff pretends not to notice. At family dinners in my mother's house, I am the oldest son, which is its own kind of weight. In rooms where business gets discussed, I am the specific version of myself that those rooms require. At Romano's, on Carmine Street in the West Village, I was for 11 years simply a man who ate alone on Thursday evenings and tipped generously and never caused any trouble. That was the arrangement. Unspoken, never negotiated, perfectly understood by both parties. Romano's was not impressive by the standards that impress the kind of people I generally do business with. No Michelin stars, no press profiles, no reservation line. 8 tables, a bar with 6 stools, a kitchen the size of a generous closet, and a menu that hadn't changed substantially since 1987, when Carmine Romano had opened the place with money borrowed from 3 uncles and a stubbornness that his daughter had inherited in full. What Romano's had was this: food made by someone who understood that the purpose of a meal was not to demonstrate technique, but to produce the specific sensation of being cared for. The braised short rib that had been on the menu since the first week and would be on the menu when the last table was cleared for the last time. The handmade pasta that Clara Romano produced every morning in the kitchen before the lunch service, which she'd started doing at 16 under her father's instruction and had never stopped. The bread, which came from a bakery 2 blocks away that had been supplying Romano's since 1989, and whose owner, a man named Sal, had been Carmine Romano's closest friend until Carmine died 6 years ago. Clara Romano had taken over the restaurant after her father's death without, as far as I could tell from 11 years of Thursday evenings, any particular crisis of confidence. She'd been running it alongside him for years. She knew every supplier, every regular customer, every quirk of the 35-year-old oven that needed to be handled a specific way, or it ran hot on the left side. She knew the restaurant the way you know something you've loved long enough that its particular difficulties feel like character rather than problems. She was 38 years old. She had dark hair that she wore pulled back at work and loose when she occasionally sat at the bar after the last table left and had a glass of wine by herself while she reviewed the next day's prep list. She had her father's eyes, which were the specific dark brown of someone who is genuinely interested in other people and shows it. She laughed easily and argued with her suppliers with a precision and warmth that suggested she'd learned negotiation the same way she'd learned to make pasta, young, from someone who cared about doing it right. I had been coming to Romano's every Thursday for 11 years. I had never had a conversation with Clara Romano that lasted more than 4 minutes. That was not because I wasn't interested. It was because Romano's was the one place in my life where I had made a deliberate choice to simply be present without agenda, and Clara Romano had, intuitively, never pushed against that boundary. She had the particular intelligence of someone who understands that some things are worth preserving exactly as they are, and that asking too many questions about a man who tips well and causes no trouble, and clearly wants nothing more than his Thursday short rib, is a category of unforced error. It was a Thursday evening in September when everything changed. I was on my second glass of wine, a Barolo she'd started carrying 2 years ago from a small producer in Piedmont that I'd told her about, in one of our 4-minute conversations, after she'd asked if I had opinions about Italian wine, when the door opened and 3 men came in. I clocked them immediately, the way I clock everything in a room where I've chosen to be present without my usual infrastructure. Not because I was concerned. Romano's was, in the vernacular of my world, clean territory. Nobody in my orbit would be careless enough to approach me here, but pattern recognition doesn't take the evening off, simply because you're trying to have a quiet meal. 3 men, early 30s, 1 doing the talking, 2 positioned behind him in the specific way that means they're there to represent a number rather than contribute a conversation. The talker had a quality about him that I recognized from a long way back, the particular confidence of someone who has been given a small amount of authority and has not yet discovered the ceiling of it. He was well-dressed in a way that was meant to signal something but signaled the wrong things to anyone who knew what to look for. Heavy watch. Shoes that cost more than he could justify on legitimate income. The easy, slightly performative walk of someone practicing being intimidating. He went directly to the bar, where Clara was reviewing an order sheet, and leaned against it. I set down my wine. He talked. She listened with her arms folded, the order sheet in one hand, her expression doing the careful, controlled thing that people do when they're deciding whether to react. I couldn't hear the conversation from my corner table. I didn't need to. The architecture of it was legible from across the room. He was presenting her with a proposition that was structured to sound like a business arrangement and had a different actual meaning. She was hearing the actual meaning and deciding what to do with it. Her jaw tightened. 2 millimeters. Involuntary. I'd seen that before. He leaned a little closer, said something with a slight smile, tapped the bar twice with 2 fingers, a gesture that was meant to read as casual but was structurally a threat, and then straightened up and looked around the room with the specific survey of someone making sure they've been seen. His eyes moved over me without stopping. Good. He nodded to the 2 men behind him and they left. Clara stood at the bar for a moment without moving. Then she set down the order sheet, went into the kitchen, came back out 2 minutes later with a composed expression, and moved through the dining room checking on the 4 occupied tables as though nothing had happened. When she came to mine, her expression was exactly what it always was. "Everything all right?" she asked. The usual question. "Yes," I said. The usual answer. She nodded and moved on. I finished my meal. I paid. I left exactly the tip I always left. At the door, I paused, turned back. "Clara," I said. She looked up from behind the bar. "I gave you a card once, years ago, when the supply issue with the fish wholesaler happened." She remembered. "Yes. If you need anything," I said, "that number still works." She held my gaze for a moment. "Thank you," she said. The way she said it told me she understood that I was not referring to supply chain issues. I nodded once and left. I sat in my car outside Romano's for a while longer than I usually sit in cars outside places, thinking about what I'd seen and what I knew, and what, if anything, the right move was. In my world, extortion operations run by street-level crews from competing families were not uncommon, and were generally someone else's problem. The territorial arrangements that kept the city's various organizations in a functional equilibrium had been in place for decades, and one of their primary functions was ensuring that exactly this kind of small-time harassment either didn't happen or got addressed internally through the appropriate channels. The appropriate channel, in this case, was the Carone family's underboss, a man named Vittorio Carone, with whom I had a professional relationship that was cordial and had never been tested. The problem was this. Romano's was on Carmine Street. Carmine Street was, in the territorial arrangement that had been in place for 22 years, Marino territory. Not in a way that was ever discussed in the presence of the restaurant's owners or customers, not in a way that appeared in any document, but in the way that mattered, which was the way understood by every family operating in Lower Manhattan. What I had just watched was a crew from the Carone organization running an extortion operation on a block that wasn't theirs. That was not technically my problem to solve. Clara Romano was not technically my responsibility. I started the engine. I thought about her jaw, the 2 millimeters, involuntary. I thought about 11 years of Thursday evenings and a Barolo from Piedmont, and the specific quality of a place where you can simply be present without being anything in particular. I thought about what it meant to watch something that belonged to the world as it should be get threatened by the world as it actually is, when you were specifically positioned to do something about it. I pulled out my phone and called Dante. "Find out," I said, "who runs the Carone crew working Carmine Street." A pause. Dante knows when a question is informational and when it's the beginning of something else. "How soon?" he said. "Tonight," I said. He didn't ask why. He never asks why when my voice has a particular quality. He knows the difference between information gathering and the thing that comes after it. I drove uptown. Romano's stayed open until 11 on Thursdays. I'd be back before then. The name Dante gave me was Marco Ferri. 29 years old, third-generation Carone associate, which meant his grandfather had done business with Vittorio's grandfather, and the relationship had been grandfathered in the literal sense, inherited rather than earned. He ran a small crew of 7 men, operating extortion and protection rackets on a 12-block radius in the West Village, and parts of the meatpacking district. His operation had been active for 4 years. He'd expanded it 18 months ago, moving from his original territory, which was legitimately Corone ground, into the blocks adjacent, which were mine. This hadn't triggered a response because no one in my organization had flagged it as a priority. Street-level extortion in the restaurant district wasn't the Marino Group's primary concern, and the crew had apparently been smart enough to keep their operations quiet enough to avoid the specific threshold of visibility that would have drawn attention. Until tonight, when I happened to be sitting in the room. I had Dante run Ferry's operation through the evening while I sat at my desk and thought about the geometry of the situation. The Corone family would not have sanctioned Ferry's expansion into Marino territory. Vittorio Corone was too careful, too experienced, too invested in the stability of the existing arrangement to have authorized something that would give me legitimate cause for complaint. Which meant Ferry had acted on his own initiative, which meant he was either stupid or had not yet encountered the specific consequence that would revise his judgment. I could call Vittorio tonight, present the territorial violation. Vittorio would pull Ferry back, reprimand him through whatever channels the Corone family used for such things, and the problem would be resolved through the existing machinery. Clara Romano's restaurant would stop being harassed, and I would have done nothing, directly. I considered this for 15 minutes. Then I called Dante back. "I need to know," I said, "how long the Romano's approach has been going on, when it started, how many times, what's been asked for." "That's going to require talking to someone inside," Dante said. "I know. Be careful, always." He called me back in 2 hours. It had been going on for 6 weeks. Ferry's man had approached Clara Romano 4 times. The ask was $3,000 a month, framed as a neighborhood security arrangement. She had refused all 4 times. The 4th refusal was tonight, and it had apparently been more direct than the previous 3. She'd told him, according to Dante's source, and I had to respect the specificity of it. "You can tell whoever sent you that I won't pay you a cent. Not tonight, not next month, not ever. My father built this restaurant without paying anyone for the right to exist, and I'm not starting now." I sat with that for a moment. My father built this restaurant without paying anyone for the right to exist. "I don't pay tribute to fear," my own father had told me once, when I was young enough to still be learning what the words meant. A man who pays tribute to fear has already decided he's afraid. The money isn't the point. The decision is. I hadn't thought about my father in a while. I picked up my phone. "Set up a meeting with Vittorio," I said to Dante. "Tomorrow. Tell him I'd like his time on a territorial matter. Keep it formal. I want him to understand it's a discussion, not a complaint." "And Clara Romano?" "I'll handle that separately," I said. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll handle it," I said. "Go home." I sat at my desk for a long time after that. 11 years of Thursday evenings. A woman who had built her father's restaurant into her own without asking anyone's permission for the right to exist. $3,000 a month, refused 4 times. "I won't pay you a cent." No, she wouldn't. And neither, I thought, would I. Clara Romano called the number on my card at 7:43 on Friday morning. I was in the car on the way to my first meeting and I answered on the second ring. "Mr. Marino." Her voice was controlled, the kind of controlled that takes effort. "Clara, I want to apologize," she said, "for calling this early. I know this isn't the kind of call you were expecting when you gave me that card." "You don't need to apologize," I said. "What happened?" A pause. I could hear her in the kitchen, the low sounds of prep work, water running, something on the stove. "They came back last night," she said, "after closing, after my staff had gone home and I was doing the end-of-day accounting. 2 of the men who were there Thursday evening. They came to the back door." "What did they do?" "They didn't touch anything," she said. "They didn't have to. One of them stood in the kitchen doorway and told me that my answer was the wrong one, and that the correct answer was due by Monday. The other one looked at my walk-in refrigerator for a long time without saying anything." She was quiet for a moment. "I know what that meant," she said. "I'm not naive about what that meant. The refrigerator holds 4 days of inventory for the weekend service. We're fully booked through Sunday. If something happens to the walk-in—" "I understand," I said. "Are you at the restaurant now?" "I came in at 5. I didn't want to be here alone, but I also didn't want to leave it empty. Is anyone else there? Sal comes at 8. He's my bread supplier, and he's also a friend, I said. I know Sal. A pause. You know Sal, she said. Since 2009, I said. He doesn't know that I know him, but yes. She processed this. Who are you, she said. The real version, not the man who eats the short rib every Thursday. I'm someone, I said, who has been eating the short rib every Thursday for 11 years and who does not intend to stop. And I'm someone who is in a position to make sure that what happened at your back door last night does not happen again. Are you going to ask me questions that I shouldn't answer about who these people are or what they want? No, I said. I know who they are and what they want. Another pause, longer. I'm not going to pay them, she said. I want you to know that before you say anything else. Whatever you're about to offer to do, I need you to know that my position on the payment is not negotiable. My father ran this restaurant for 30 years without paying anyone for the right to be here. I'm not changing that. I know, I said. How do you know? Because your exact words, I said, were, I won't pay you a cent. Not tonight, not next month, not ever. She was very quiet. How do you know what I said to them? Because when something happens in my territory, I find out what was said. Your territory. The words landed in the silence between us. I'll be at Romano's at 9, I said. Leave the back door unlocked. She didn't respond for a moment. The short rib, she said finally. Is that why you've been coming every Thursday? No, I said. The short rib is genuinely exceptional. Another pause. 9 o'clock, she said, 9 o'clock. I hung up and told my driver to reroute. Some meetings could wait. This one was already overdue by 11 years. Romano's in the morning was a different place than Romano's at dinner. The dining room was quiet, chairs still on some of the tables, the particular stillness of a space that hadn't been activated yet for the day. The kitchen, by contrast, was fully operational. The smell of stock on the stove, the long, slow stock that Clara started before dawn and let go all day, came through the swinging door with an authority that reminded you why you kept coming back. She was at the prep counter when I came through the back door. Knife in hand, working through a pile of shallots with a speed that meant she'd done it 10,000 times. She looked up when I came in, assessed me with the direct look she gave everyone who entered her kitchen, and nodded once. Sit down, she said, gesturing toward the small wooden stool in the corner that I'd seen her father occupy in the same way years ago, when he'd talk to suppliers or handle paperwork while the kitchen worked around him. I sat. She finished the shallots, wiped her hands, poured 2 coffees from the pot on the counter without asking, set one in front of me and stood on the other side of the prep table. Tell me what I need to know, she said. The men who've been coming, I said, work for a crew called the Ferry Operation. They're associated with a larger organization in the city. They've been running what amounts to a neighborhood tax on local businesses, protection money in the old language. They've been doing it in this area for about 18 months. You've been one of their targets for 6 weeks. She listened without interrupting. Her hands were wrapped around her coffee mug and her expression was the same as it had been at the bar Thursday night. Controlled, processing, not giving anything unnecessary away. The block Romano's is on, I said, is not their territory. They moved into it without authorization from the people who would need to authorize it. That's a violation of an arrangement that's been in place for a long time. An arrangement between who? Between the organizations that operate in this part of the city, including mine. She held my gaze. You're telling me, she said carefully, that the reason they chose the wrong restaurant to threaten is because this restaurant sits on your block. Essentially, yes. And what does that mean for me? It means, I said, that what happened at your back door last night was not just a threat against you. It was an action taken on ground that belongs to someone who has a direct interest in correcting it. She looked at her coffee. My father, she said slowly, paid for this building in 1987. He paid property tax on it every year until he died. I've paid it every year since. That's not the kind of territory I'm talking about. I know it's not. She looked up. I grew up in this neighborhood. I know what kind of territory you're talking about. She knew. She'd grown up in the West Village in the 80s, the daughter of an Italian-American restaurateur, in a time and place where the arrangements I was describing were not abstractions. She hadn't grown up inside those arrangements, but she'd grown up adjacent to them, and she wasn't pretending otherwise. "What I need from you," I said, "is straightforward. I need you to continue exactly as you have been. Come to work, run your service, don't change anything, don't contact the police. Not because you can't, but because involving law enforcement at this stage would complicate a resolution that I can reach more quickly through other means." She looked at me for a long moment. "And what exactly are those other means?" "I'm going to have a conversation with the organization that Ferry's crew is affiliated with," I said. "That conversation will result in Ferry's operation being removed from this area. The men who came to your back door will not come back. And if they do, they won't." "How certain are you?" "Very." She processed this with the same methodical quality she brought to everything. Knife work, menu planning. The question of whether to trust a man who'd been eating at her Thursday table for 11 years and had just told her he had territorial authority over her block. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything." "All those Thursdays," she said. "Short rib, Barolo, same corner table, generous tip, never any trouble." She looked at me steadily. Was that real? Or was it, she searched for the word, maintenance, keeping an eye on things? "Both can be true," I said, "but if you're asking whether I came because I genuinely wanted to, the answer is yes. You run the best restaurant in Lower Manhattan, and you've been doing it since before you were old enough to legally drink in it." She almost smiled. Almost. "You knew my father," she said. "I knew of him," I said. "I came for the first time 3 months after he died. A friend recommended the restaurant. I'd never been." Her expression changed slightly. "The first time was a Thursday?" she said. "Yes." She looked at her coffee. "He died on a Wednesday," she said. "He had a heart attack in the kitchen on a Wednesday evening during the dinner service. He was gone before the ambulance arrived." She was quiet for a moment. "I ran the service to the end of the night. I didn't know what else to do. He would have wanted the kitchen to finish the service." "I know," I said. "I heard that story from Sal eventually. Years later." She held my gaze. "And you still came back every Thursday. Every Thursday for 11 years. She was quiet. The back door opened and Sal came in, a compact man in his 60s, carrying 2 large cloth bags of bread with the ease of someone who'd been carrying bread since before Clara was born. He stopped when he saw me. His expression went through 3 things in rapid succession: surprise, assessment, and then the particular settled look of a man who's been around long enough to understand some contexts without needing them explained. "Morning," he said to Clara. "Set the bags on the counter." Nodded at me with the neutral respect of someone who knows a name and has decided that the situation does not require comment. "Sal," Clara said, "everything's fine." "Of course it is," Sal said, and went back out for the second load. Clara looked at me. "He knows who you are," she said. "He knows enough," I said. "Does that mean I'm safe right now?" She said it without drama, direct, wanting the accurate answer. "You've been safe on this block for 11 years, I said. "That hasn't changed. What changes now is that the people who thought they could change it are about to find out they were wrong." She looked at me for a long moment. Her father's eyes, dark and genuinely interested and not flinching from what they saw. "Thank you," she said, "for coming this morning." "Thank you for calling," I said. She picked up her knife and went back to work. I finished my coffee in her kitchen while the stock simmered, and Sal came and went with bread and the morning prep built toward the shape of the lunch service. It was the most normal 45 minutes I'd spent in a very long time. At 9:45 I stood to go. "Clara," I said. She looked up. "Monday," I said. "The deadline they gave you. Nothing will happen on Monday. But if anyone contacts you before I've finished what I need to finish, you call me immediately." She nodded once. "The short rib," she said. "Yes?" "It's better on Thursdays," she said. "Something about the way the week builds up to it. The stock goes longer." She almost smiled again. "Come Thursday." "I will," I said. The meeting with Vittorio Caroni took place that afternoon in a social club on Mulberry Street that had been in the Caroni family's possession since the early 70s. It was the kind of place that existed in fewer and fewer numbers in the city. Dark wood, photographs on the walls, the smell of espresso and something being cooked in the back. Men of a certain age playing cards at a corner table who were not actually playing cards. Vittorio was in his late 60s. He had the compact, careful quality of someone who had survived by paying attention and not making unnecessary movements. We had met on perhaps a dozen occasions over the years. The relationship was that specific category of professional respect between men who operate in the same space and have chosen, through mutual calculation, to be useful to each other rather than the alternative. He stood when I came in. We shook hands. Luca. He gestured to the chairs. Sit. We sat. Coffee appeared without anyone asking for it. This is a particular ritual I've participated in many times, and it always means the same thing. We're being civil. Good. I appreciate your time, I said. You said territorial matter. He was direct. I've always respected that about him. What territory? Carmine Street, I said. The Romanos block. He was quiet for a moment, but it was the specific quiet of a man who already knows what's coming and is deciding how to frame his response, not the quiet of someone surprised. The ferry crew, he said. Yes. He looked at his coffee. You know about the expansion. I know about 6 weeks of approaches to a restaurant on my block, I said, and a visit to the proprietor's back door after closing, alone. His jaw tightened slightly, the involuntary kind. That last part, he said, was not sanctioned. I know, I said. That's why we're having this conversation instead of a different kind of conversation. He looked at me with the steady appraisal of a man doing calculation. The expansion into the adjacent blocks, he said carefully, was ferry acting without authorization. I became aware of it 3 months ago. I had a conversation with him about the boundaries. And? He's 29 years old, Vittorio said. He heard what I said. He didn't stop. He was quiet. I've been managing the situation internally. But the Romanos account specifically, I didn't know about the backdoor visit. He said this with the specific weight of a man distinguishing between what he knew and what he didn't. Because in our world, that distinction matters for what comes next. I understand that distinction, I said. I'm not here to assign responsibility you haven't taken. I'm here because the situation needs to end, and I want to give you the opportunity to end it through your own channels before it becomes something that requires different handling. He nodded slowly. How much time do I have? They gave the proprietor a Monday deadline, I said. I'd like it resolved before that. He was quiet for a moment. The proprietor, he said. Is that personal? It's territorial, I said. Carmine Street is mine, that's the point. He held my gaze for a beat longer than necessary. Yes, he said finally. It is. Ferry will be pulled back. The Romano situation will be closed. I want it closed with a guarantee, I said. Not just Ferry, his crew. No one from your organization contacts Clara Romano or her restaurant again. Ever. If that guarantee holds, the territorial violation stays between us and doesn't go any further. He understood what I was and wasn't saying. If the guarantee didn't hold, the conversation would escalate to a level that neither of us wanted, and that would cost both organizations something real. You have it, he said. We shook hands again at the door. Driving back downtown, Dante asked from the front seat, How did it go? As expected, I said. And the restaurant? Safe. He was quiet for a moment. You've been going there for 11 years, he said. I always thought it was just the food. It is just the food, I said. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror and had the wisdom to say nothing else. Clara Romano called me Saturday at noon. Her voice had a quality I hadn't heard in it before. Not panic, because panic wasn't a gear she appeared to have, but a tight, controlled urgency. Something happened, she said. Tell me. Someone opened my walk-in refrigerator, she said. Overnight. The seal was broken. I don't know when exactly. It could have been last night or early this morning. Everything inside is compromised. 4 days of protein, the weekend's fish order, the entire pastry prep for Saturday and Sunday service. Her voice stayed level with visible effort. We're fully booked tonight and tomorrow. I have 64 covers tonight alone. I was out of my chair before she finished. Are you at the restaurant? Yes. I've been here since 6. I've called my suppliers, but it's Saturday. The fish market doesn't do Saturday restocking at this scale. I'm trying to figure out if I can reroute the service to, Clara, stop. I'll fix this. You can't fix a walk-in full of compromised protein in. I'll fix it, I said again. Don't cancel a single reservation. Don't change anything on the front end. Keep your staff on schedule. Can you be in the kitchen until I get there? I'm not going anywhere, she said. 30 minutes. I called 3 numbers in the following 8 minutes. The first was to a wholesale meat supplier I'd been using for the Marino Group's legitimate restaurant investments for 6 years. A man named Pietro who worked Saturdays because he'd never in his career taken a Saturday off. I told him what I needed, the quantities, the cuts, and gave him the Carmine Street address. The second call was to a fish supplier in Red Hook who owed me a significant professional favor and who answered his personal cell on the second ring. Same information, same address. 3 hours. The third call was to Dante. Find out, I said, who opened Clara Romano's walk-in refrigerator. His voice went careful. I thought Vittorio was handling it. He is. This was before last night's conversation. Or someone didn't get the message before it happened. And if it was deliberate? After the conversation? Then the conversation wasn't enough, I said. Find out which. I was at Romano's in 22 minutes. The kitchen was in the particular organized chaos of a professional cook confronting a logistical crisis. Clara moving quickly between stations, her sous chef on the phone with a vendor, a prep cook going through the walk-in systematically and logging what was unsalvageable. She looked up when I came in. I told you not to cancel the reservations, I said. I haven't, she said. But Luca, the fish alone. Pietro is delivering beef and lamb by 2 o'clock, I said. The fish order is coming from Red Hook. Should be here by 3. She stared at me. It's Saturday, she said. Nobody delivers on Saturday on 4 hours' notice. I said, Pietro works Saturdays. She looked at me for a long moment. The specific look of someone recalibrating what they know about a situation. What do you need from me, she asked. Tell me your Saturday menu, I said. We'll figure out what adjustments are necessary and what holds. She pulled out her prep list and we stood at the prep counter for 40 minutes going through it line by line. She was, I discovered in those 40 minutes, one of the most precise people I'd ever worked beside in any context. No second guessing, no wasted motion. When she saw a problem, she identified the simplest solution, stated it, and moved on. When she identified that a dish couldn't work with the replacement proteins, she proposed an alternative that used what was available, explained the logic, and asked once if I agreed before committing to it. By 11:30, she had a revised service plan for the evening that was, she admitted, possibly better in 2 cases than the original. How? I asked. Because the lamb Pietro's bringing is better than what I had, she said. I've been ordering from a different supplier for 2 years because the price is lower. She looked at the revised prep list. Sometimes the crisis is the correction. Pietro arrived at 1:58, which I noted because he was 2 minutes early, which is the specific marker of a man who takes his relationships seriously. He brought 2 of his staff to help with the carry-in and stayed for 15 minutes to go over the order personally. He shook my hand on the way out and nodded at Clara with the particular respect of a man who understands he's in the presence of someone who runs a real kitchen. The fish arrived from Red Hook at 3:12. By 4 o'clock, the kitchen was back in operational order. Clara stood at the pass and looked at what they'd built from the wreckage of the morning, and then looked at me. 64 covers, she said. 64 covers, I confirmed. She was quiet for a moment. Whoever did this, she said. The refrigerator. It was the same people. Yes, I said, probably. You said you were having a conversation with someone. I did have that conversation. And? It's being handled. She looked at me. Is it possible, she said carefully, that the conversation made it worse before it makes it better? I thought about this honestly. It's possible that last night's damage was done before the conversation produced its effect, I said. I don't believe it was a response to the conversation. The timing suggests it was already planned. She nodded slowly. So they escalated before they got pulled back? Yes. She processed this. And from here? From here they're done, I said. I have Vittorio Caroni's word. She looked at me steadily. Is that worth something? In this context, yes. He's a careful man who understands what it costs him if his word isn't worth something. She held my gaze for a moment longer. Then she went back to her kitchen. I stayed through the prep. I stayed through the first seating. I sat at my corner table, the same corner table, and ate the revised Saturday menu, which was, as Clara had suggested, possibly better than the original, and watched her run a full dining room on a Saturday night after a morning that would have sent lesser operators to the phone to cancel reservations. She was extraordinary at it, not just technically, not just in the execution of the service, in the specific quality of her presence, the way she moved through the room checking tables, the way she talked to her staff with the directness of someone who trusts them and expects them to trust her back, the way she laughed at a regular customer's joke in a way that was genuine and then pivoted immediately back to something that needed handling in the kitchen. She ran the restaurant the way she talked to me, without performance, without the apparatus of impression management, simply doing the thing. At 10:15, after the last table had finished dessert, she came and stood at the edge of my table. "The lamb special," she said. "Better than the fish?" "Significantly," I said. "I'll call Pietro on Monday," she said. She sat down across from me for the first time in 11 years of Thursday evenings. "This is," I said, "a new development." She picked up the wine glass I hadn't finished and took a drink without asking. "You sat in my kitchen this morning and built me a service out of nothing," she said. "I think that earns you a different table dynamic." I considered this. "Fair," I said. She set down the wine. "Tell me who you are," she said, the way Elena had asked, the way people ask when they want the real version. I thought about what I'd said to Elena. Different field, different methods, same orientation. I said the same thing to Clara Romano, differently because she was a different person in a different context, but the truth at the center of it was the same truth. She listened with the quality she brought to everything, fully present, not performing interest, letting what I said arrive before deciding what to do with it. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "My father," she said, "knew men like you. He never did business with any of them, but he knew them. He used to say that the ones to be careful of weren't the ones who seemed dangerous. The dangerous ones were easy to read once you knew the vocabulary." "What did he say to look for?" She looked at me. "The ones who were genuinely good at something else," she said, "who had another life, real skill, real care for something outside the business. Those were the ones you couldn't fully predict, because they had a part of themselves that the rest of it hadn't reached." I looked at her. "And what did he think of those ones?" I asked. She held my gaze. "He said they were the most human ones," she said, "which made them the most complicated." She stood up, collected the empty wine glass, looked down at me. "Thursday," she said. "Thursday," I said. She went back to close her kitchen. I sat at my corner table for a few more minutes looking at the room, the photographs on the walls that Carmine Romano had put up in 1987, the bar that Clara had refinished 2 years ago herself because the quote from the contractor was too high, the 8 tables that had fed this neighborhood for 38 years. The most human ones, Carmine Romano had told his daughter. The most complicated. He wasn't wrong. Dante's report came Sunday morning. The walk-in had been opened by a man named Ricky Ferri, Marco Ferri's younger brother. 24 years old, no particular position in the crew, the kind of peripheral associate who gets used for errands that require someone expendable. He'd done it at 2 in the morning with a set of picks, working alone, which suggested it had been Marco's decision and not a crew operation. The specific signature of something done impulsively, without planning, by someone who wanted to send a message before he got told to stop sending messages. Marco had found out about Thursday's conversation, or guessed it was coming, and acted before the constraint arrived. He was, as I had diagnosed at the bar, a young man with a small amount of authority and no ceiling on it yet discovered. I called Vittorio at 7 in the morning, Sunday. He answered on the first ring. "The walk-in at Romano's," I said. "That was the Ferri brothers. Marco authorized it, Ricky executed it." This happened after our conversation. A pause. A very specific kind of pause. "I understand," Vittorio said. "Do you?" "Yes." His voice had shifted into the register of a man who has realized the extent of a problem and is now managing both the problem and the relationship damaged by it. "I owe you an apology, Luca, and I owe you more than that." "What I need," I said, "is not an apology. What I need is for Marco Ferri to understand, personally and specifically, that the Romano situation is over, and that if he or anyone connected to him comes within 2 blocks of that restaurant for any reason, he will be answering to me directly and not through you." Vittorio was quiet for a moment. "That's a significant statement," he said. "It's the accurate one," I said. He understood. When I said answering to me, I was not speaking in the abstract. I was being literal. And Vittorio, who had been doing business in this city for 4 decades, understood the specific weight of a literal statement from a Marino. "I'll make it clear," he said. "Today," I said. "Today," he confirmed. I hung up and sat with my coffee and thought about Marco Ferri. 29 years old, 3rd generation. Just smart enough to build something and not smart enough to know where the ceiling was. He'd find out today. Sometimes that's the only education that takes. Monday came and went without incident at Romano's. I knew this because Clara sent me a text at 11:15 that evening, a number she'd now apparently saved from the call she'd made Saturday morning. "Nothing," she said. "Full service. No visitors." "Good," I sent back. A pause, then, "Thank you." And then, after another pause, "The lamb was exceptional. Called Pietro. He's coming Tuesday." I sat with my phone and thought about what it meant that she'd texted rather than called. It meant she'd moved from using my number as an emergency resource to using it as a line of casual communication, which was a shift in the architecture of our relationship that she would have made deliberately, because Clara Romano did most things deliberately. I responded, "He'll take care of you." She sent back one word, "Already has." Then nothing else. I put down the phone and went back to work. On Wednesday afternoon, Dante brought me the additional piece of information that I'd been waiting for and wasn't particularly surprised by. He set a folder on my desk. "Marco Ferri's operation," he said, "beyond the restaurant territory." I opened the folder. The extortion wasn't limited to restaurants. It covered 14 businesses in the expanded territory: restaurants, dry cleaners, a bodega, a hair salon, a small accounting firm. Combined monthly take across all 14 was approximately $60,000. A portion of that, the exact percentage was unclear, but Dante estimated a third, went up to the Carone organization as tribute. The rest, Marco kept. The businesses had been paying, with 2 exceptions. Romano's was one. The other was a dry cleaner on Bleecker Street owned by a 63-year-old Korean immigrant named Mr. Park, who had apparently told Ferri's crew, in his second encounter with them, to get out of his store using language that Dante described as colorful. I looked at the folder. 12 businesses paying, 2 refusing. $60,000 a month flowing to an operation that had no legitimate basis and was operating on stolen ground. This was the part of the equation I hadn't fully reckoned with yet. Vittorio pulling Ferri back would stop the operation from expanding. It would close the Romano situation. It would honor the territorial arrangement. But it wouldn't stop what was happening to the 12 businesses that were already paying. It wouldn't address the 6 weeks of extortion that Clara Romano and Mr. Park had already endured. It wouldn't guarantee that Marco Ferri, pulled back from Carmine Street, wouldn't simply redirect his operation to a different set of businesses in legitimately Carone territory. I sat with the folder for a long time. In my life, I have made many decisions about how far to extend a response. The principle I apply is not complicated, but it requires honesty. How large is the actual problem, and what does genuinely addressing it require? The mistake that most people make is answering a smaller version of the question than the one that's actually there. They resolve the immediate situation and call it done. They move on. The actual problem persists. I had resolved the immediate situation. Romano's was safe. The Carone agreement was in place. Vittorio's word was his word. But the actual problem was a 29-year-old man running a systematic extortion operation across 26 blocks, targeting small business owners who had no mechanism to refuse him, who had no Vittorio to call, who had no name on their block that carried the weight mine did. I closed the folder. "Dante," I said, "still here. The federal unit that handles organized crime extortion, the one that's been running the Carone monitoring operation for the past 2 years. He was quiet for a moment. "Castellano," he said, "at the field office on Federal Plaza." "Yes, you want to make a call?" "I want to make a call," I said. but I want it done in a way that doesn't come back to me directly and doesn't implicate the Corone organization at the institutional level. This is about ferries specifically, the unsanctioned expansion, the specific businesses, the specific amounts, the specific timeline. That's a narrow lane, Dante said. It's accurate, I said. Vittorio didn't sanction this. He's been trying to pull it back internally. I'm not burning the whole relationship for the actions of a 29-year-old who didn't listen. Dante was quiet again. And Clara Romano? She doesn't need to be in the federal picture unless she wants to be, I said. That's her choice. And Mr. Park? I'd like to speak to him, I said, before anything else moves. I'll find out if he's willing, Dante said. He was. Mr. Park, it turned out, had been waiting for someone to ask. Mr. Park's dry cleaning establishment on Bleecker Street was 14 years old, small, and immaculate in the way of businesses run by people for whom quality is not a selling point, but a personal standard. He was a compact man in his mid-60s with a watchful quality and the particular physical steadiness of someone who has worked with his hands for a long time. He shook my hand with a grip that said something about him without needing words. His wife brought tea without being asked. She sat at the counter and did paperwork and clearly had no intention of leaving. I respected that. I told Mr. Park what I knew and what I was planning to do and why. I told him, as I'd told Clara, the direct version without significant softening. He listened. His wife listened from behind her paperwork. When I finished, Mr. Park was quiet for a moment. "You want to report this to the FBI," he said. "To a specific federal contact who is already building a file on the Corone organization," I said. "The information about Ferry's operation, the unsanctioned expansion, the specific businesses, the amounts, would accelerate a process that's already underway. And my name? You can choose whether to speak to them directly," I said. "I can provide the structural information without identifying you or any other business owner by name. The FBI will build their own list of victims once the investigation opens formally. At that point, participation is voluntary." He looked at his wife. She looked at him. 14 years, he said. "I built this place in 14 years. 2 of my children work here on weekends." "I know," I said. "I know it is." He was quiet for another moment. "Do it," he said. "Whatever you're going to do it. And tell them," he paused, "tell them about the Saturday in March when they broke my front window." After I said no, "I will," I said. His wife refilled my tea without asking. The federal contact's name was Castellano. He worked financial crimes and organized extortion out of the field office on Federal Plaza, and he had been for 4 years the specific kind of contact that exists in my world. Not an informant arrangement, which has a specific and unflattering architecture, but a channel through which certain information moved in ways that served an overlapping set of interests. I called him Thursday morning. "I have something specific for you," I said. "Carmine Street and the surrounding 12 blocks. A crew called the ferry operation." He was very still on the line. The specific stillness of a federal agent hearing a name he already knows. "We've been watching the edges of that for 8 months, he said. "I can give you the center of it," I said. "Business by business, monthly amounts, timeline, the expansion history, the specific individuals involved." "And your interest in providing this?" "The operation crossed into my territory without authorization," I said. "That's been addressed through appropriate channels. What I'm giving you is the rest of it, the part that doesn't involve my territory, and that those channels won't address." He understood. I was not asking for anything in return. I was providing information about an operation that had caused harm to people who had no other recourse. The fact that it also served my interests, removing a disruptive element from my area of operation, maintaining the integrity of territorial arrangements, was something both of us understood and neither of us needed to state. We talked for 40 minutes. When it was over, Castellano said, "This is going to move." "How soon?" I asked. "Faster than you'd think," he said. "We've been waiting for the inside of this." I hung up, called Dante. "It's in motion," I said. He didn't ask about Romano's. He said, "Thursday tonight?" "Yes," I said. "Thursday tonight." Clara Romano was behind the bar when I came in at 7:15. She looked up, nodded once. The same nod she'd been giving me for 11 years, but it sat differently now, with the weight of 2 weeks behind it and a Saturday morning in her kitchen, and 64 covers rebuilt from nothing. "Your table," she said. She said it the way she always said it, but there was something in it that hadn't been there before. An ease. The ease that comes after something difficult has been survived together. I sat down. Domenico, her sous chef, a young man from Naples who had been with her for 3 years and who moved through the kitchen with a focus that told you he understood what he was learning, brought the Barolo without being asked. I looked at the room. 8 tables. 4 of them occupied. The Thursday evening particular quality of Romano's, not the weekend rush, but the regular customers, the people who came because they knew what to expect and wanted exactly that. Clara came out of the kitchen 20 minutes later and stopped at my table. "Monday," she said. "No one came." "I know. Tuesday. Wednesday. Nothing." "It's done," I said. She looked at me for a moment. "All of it?" "All of it," I said. "There are some additional elements that are being handled through a different channel, but nothing that touches Romano's directly." She processed this with her customary precision. "The other businesses," she said, "on the block." I looked at her. "They're being addressed," I said. She nodded slowly. "Good," she said. She moved to go back to the kitchen, stopped. "The short rib," she said. "I made it today the way my father made it in 1989. Before he changed the recipe in 1994 because he thought the new version was better." She looked at me steadily. "I've been making the 1994 version for 6 years. Tonight is the 1989 version. I wanted you to try it." "Why tonight?" I asked. She looked at me. "Because some things are worth going back to," she said, "to understand which version you actually want." She went back into the kitchen. I sat with that for a moment, and then I sat with the Barolo and the room, and the particular quality of a Thursday evening at Romano's, which was the one uncomplicated thing I had in my life, and which had turned out in the past 2 weeks to be more complicated than I'd allowed it to be, and more worth it than I'd understood. The 1989 short rib arrived. It was, as she had implied it would be, better. Not because the technique was superior, because it was the original. The version that her father had built before he decided to change it. The foundation under everything that had come after. I thought about what she'd said. Some things are worth going back to understand which version you actually want. I stayed until the last table left. It was the first time in 11 years I'd stayed that late. At 10:45, Clara came out of the kitchen and sat down across from me again, the same way she had on Saturday. She'd brought the bottle. There was still a glass in it, and she poured for both of us. She looked at the room. "My father used to sit here after the last table left," she said. "He'd have a glass of whatever was open, and he'd look at the room and he'd say, 'Another day where someone ate well. That's enough.'" "That's enough," I agreed. She held her glass. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Ask." "The Saturday morning, when you came to the kitchen, you stayed through the prep and the service, and you helped me build something out of nothing." She looked at me. "Was that because of the territorial obligation? Because Romano's is on your block and you had an interest in keeping it operational?" She asked it the way she asked most things, directly, wanting the accurate answer, not the flattering one. I thought about the accurate answer. "It started as territorial," I said. "The 3 men Thursday night, that was a professional concern. The call Friday morning, that was obligation. The Saturday morning in your kitchen was—" I stopped. She waited. "That was different," I said. "Different how?" "Because by Saturday morning I wasn't thinking about territory," I said. "I was thinking about 64 covers and a walk-in full of compromised protein and a woman who'd built her father's restaurant into something extraordinary and was about to have a Saturday service destroyed by someone who hadn't understood what they were taking on." She looked at me steadily. "And now?" she said. I held her gaze. "Now I'm thinking about the 1989 short rib," I said, "and a woman who knew which version was the right one and waited for the moment to serve it." She held my gaze for a long time. The room was quiet around us. The photographs on the walls. The bar Carmine Romano had built in 1987 that his daughter had refinished with her own hands because the contractor quote was too high. "Another day where someone ate well," she said softly. "That's enough," I said. She smiled. "The full version, not the almost version." It was the first time I'd seen it. I filed it with the precision I apply to things I don't want to forget. She picked up the wine bottle. "There's one more glass in here," she said. "I'm staying," I said. She poured. Outside, the city was doing what it does, loud and indifferent, running past Carmine Street the way it had been running past Carmine Street since long before Carmine Romano had borrowed money from 3 uncles and opened a restaurant that was still here 38 years later, still serving short rib, still using Sal's bread, still feeding the neighborhood on a foundation of genuine care and the stubborn refusal to be anything other than exactly what it was. Inside, it was very quiet, and something that had been uncomplicated for 11 years was becoming something else. I didn't know yet what it was. I knew it was worth finding out. The ferry operation fell in 11 days. Castellano moved faster than he'd predicted, which told me the file had been thinner than they'd wanted, and the information I'd provided had given it the structural integrity it needed to become actionable. A federal extortion case requires documentation of a pattern, not a single incident, but a systematic practice that can be demonstrated across time and across victims. What I'd given Castellano was the complete picture, the timeline, the business-by-business breakdown, the amounts, the escalation history. Dante told me about the arrests on a Friday morning. Marco Ferri and 4 members of his crew picked up at 3 different locations in the span of 90 minutes. 2 additional members were apprehended by noon. Ricky Ferri, the walk-in, was taken at his apartment at 1:15 in the afternoon. 7 arrests, 7 federal charges. I read the arrest record that Dante had obtained through channels, and then set it down and thought about the 12 businesses that had been paying $3,000 a month to people who had no right to ask for it. About 6 months of payments for most of them, for some longer. They'd get their money back only if the federal asset forfeiture process produced funds to return. That process was slow and uncertain. It was not something I could accelerate through any legitimate channel. It was also not, technically, my responsibility. I thought about Mr. Park's wife refilling my tea without being asked. I called Dante. "Find out," I said, "the total amount the 12 businesses paid over the life of the operation. As precisely as you can." He called me back at 4 in the afternoon. The number he gave me was $214,000, across 12 businesses, mostly small, mostly run by people who had built something with the specific combination of stubbornness and care that you see in people who build things in a city that doesn't give anything away. I sat with the number for a while. Then I called my accountant. "There is a fund," I said, "that I maintain for community development purposes in the lower Manhattan area. I'd like to make a distribution from it. 12 recipients. Amounts to be confirmed." He didn't ask questions. This was not the first time I'd used that fund in a way that required no public record. I had Dante compile the business addresses and the amounts. The distributions were processed by Monday morning. 12 envelopes, 12 different amounts, each one accompanied by a single printed card that said nothing except, "With respect." No signature. Mr. Park called Dante's number, the intermediary contact Dante had used when setting up our meeting, on Tuesday morning. He didn't leave a message. He stayed on the line for 4 seconds and then hung up. I understood that as the response it was. Clara called me Thursday at noon. "You need to hear something," she said. "I'll be there at 7, I said. "Not the restaurant," she said. "Can you come to the kitchen now?" I rerouted the afternoon. She was at the prep counter when I came through the back door. She was not making pasta or breaking down proteins. She was standing with her arms folded and her back to the door, looking at the wall where her father's original menu, hand-lettered, framed, from 1987, hung beside the pass-through. She turned when she heard me. Her expression was controlled in a way that told me something had shifted in the last 24 hours. "Sit down," she said. I sat on the wooden stool in the corner. She stayed standing. "A woman named Patricia Mena came in for lunch yesterday," she said. "She owns a dry cleaning shop on Bleecker. I've known her by face for years. She's been coming in occasionally. She came in yesterday specifically to tell me something." She looked at me. She told me that she and 11 other businesses in the neighborhood had each received an envelope on Monday, she said, with an amount of money that corresponded exactly to what they'd been forced to pay over the past several months to the people who'd been threatening them. She held my gaze. No letter, no signature. She looked at the original menu on the wall. One card in each envelope that said, "With respect." She was quiet. Patricia told me she'd talked to the others, she said. All 12 of them got the same envelope. All 12 of them have the same question. I waited. They want to know who sent it, Clara said, and they're all, according to Patricia, fairly certain they already know. She looked at me. Did you do that? She asked. Yes. She held my gaze for a long moment. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't something that required your input or your awareness, I said. It was something that needed to happen. $200,000, she said, give or take. 214, I said. She looked at the 1987 menu on the wall. That's not a small thing, she said. No. She turned back to me. Patricia Mena cried when she told me, she said. She said she's been carrying the weight of those payments for months, that she'd been ashamed of paying, that she'd been afraid to tell anyone. She paused. She said the envelope felt like someone acknowledged that it was real, that what happened to her was real, and that it mattered. I looked at Clara. It was real, I said, and it did matter. She was quiet. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know. Your territorial obligation was satisfied when Vittorio agreed to pull Ferry back. Yes. You put 7 people in federal custody. The operation is over. By any reasonable accounting, the problem was solved. Yes. She studied me. So why? She said. The envelopes. The money. The part that nobody asked for and nobody would have known you'd done if Patricia Mena hadn't come in for lunch. I thought about how to answer it. Because solving the problem, I said, and addressing what the problem cost the people it happened to, those are 2 different things. And the second one matters. She held my gaze. Your father, she said. You told me the fund is for community development in Lower Manhattan. That's what it says on the documentation, I said. She almost smiled. Almost. My father would have liked you, she said. He had very specific opinions about what the word community meant. He thought it meant something you were responsible to, not just something you benefited from. He was right, I said. Yes, she said. He was. She went to the counter and poured 2 coffees, set one in front of me and stood on the other side of the prep table. I want to tell you something, she said. Go ahead. When my father died, she said, I didn't grieve properly for about 2 years. I ran the restaurant. I kept everything running. I maintained exactly what he'd built, and I didn't let myself fall apart because the restaurant was the thing and the restaurant had to continue. She held her coffee mug with both hands. And then one evening about 2 years later, I was sitting at the bar after service, the way I do sometimes, and I was looking at the room and I thought, this is mine now, not his, mine. I've been running it the way he would have wanted it run, and now I need to run it the way I want to run it. And I realized those were the same thing, that what I wanted was what he'd taught me to want. The work, the quality, the responsibility to the people who came in through the door. She looked at me. I'm telling you this because you asked me last Thursday which version was the right one. The 1989 or the 1994? I remember. The answer is neither, she said. The right version is the one I'd make today, which is built on both of them, which knows where it came from and knows what it's become. She held my gaze. I'm still figuring out the right version of most things, she said. But I know what the foundation is. I know what I'm building on. And I know what I won't compromise and what I will. She said this with the same quality she brought to everything, directly, having decided on it, without second-guessing. I looked at her across the prep table in her kitchen. This woman who had run her father's restaurant for 6 years alone, who had refused $3,000 a month 4 times and said it clearly, I won't pay you a cent, who had rebuilt a Saturday service from nothing in 4 hours, who had sat down across from me for the first time in 11 years because she'd decided the context warranted it. Clara, I said. Yes, I've been coming to your table every Thursday for 11 years because it's the one place in my life where I'm not required to be anything in particular, where the transaction is simple, where what I want is straightforwardly available, and I can have it without politics or calculation. She listened. That's changed, I said. I don't mean the restaurant, I mean what I want when I come here. She held my gaze. And what do you want? She said. The same thing I've always wanted, I said. To sit in a room where something real is happening and be part of it, but not at the corner table anymore. She was quiet for a long moment. "What changed it?" she said. "Your back door at 9 in the morning," I said. "Your prep list on a Saturday. The 1989 short rib served on a Thursday because you'd decided it was the right moment." She set down her coffee. "You've been coming here for 11 years, she said. "You know this room better than almost anyone." "I know the Thursday version of it," I said. "I'd like to know the rest." She looked at me with her father's eyes, dark and interested and not flinching. "The rest is complicated," she said. "I've been told I'm equipped for complicated." She almost smiled. "Thursday evenings," she said, "you know." "Yes. The rest of the week is different. I understand that." She picked up her coffee again. "My father used to say that anyone worth knowing was complicated in ways that were worth the effort," she said. "He was right," I said. "He usually was." She looked at the 1987 menu on the wall. "Tell me something," she said, "anything. The first Thursday, 11 years ago, 3 months after my father died." She turned back to me. "You said a friend recommended the restaurant. What did they tell you about it?" I thought about it. "They said, 'There's a place on Carmine Street. The food tastes like someone means it. Go on a Thursday. The short rib is better then.'" She looked at me for a long moment. "That sounds like Sal," she said. I looked at her. "He never told me he sent you," she said. "In 11 years he never mentioned it." "He wouldn't," I said. "Sal is a man who does things without needing credit for them." Clara was quiet. "He came in the morning after my father died," she said softly. "Before anyone else. He stocked the bread for the service. He didn't say anything about it. He just came and did it." She paused. "I've never told him what that meant." "Tell him," I said. She looked at the wall. "Yes," she said, "I will." The kitchen was quiet around us, the stock on the stove long and slow, the particular smell of a kitchen that was loved by someone who understood what kitchens were for. "Thursday?" she said finally. "Thursday," I said. She went back to work. I sat on the wooden stool in the corner until she looked up at me with an expression that said, "You don't have to leave yet." So I didn't. For the first time in 11 years of Thursday evenings, I spent a Wednesday afternoon in Romano's kitchen and didn't feel like I was taking something that wasn't offered. It was offered. I understood sitting there in the particular warmth of a kitchen that meant something, that this was the version I'd been building toward without knowing I was building toward it. The right version. Not the original and not the revision. The one built on both of them that knew where it came from. Still figuring it out, but knowing what the foundation was. "That's enough," Carmine Romano had said every evening after the last table left. "Another day where someone ate well. That's enough." He was right. He usually was. The weeks that followed had a rhythm to them that I hadn't experienced before. Thursday evenings, which had been the same for 11 years, became something different. Not because the form changed, but because the content had. Same corner table, same Barolo, same short rib. But now, when Clara came out to check the table, she sometimes sat down for a few minutes and talked. And those few minutes were real in a way that the previous 4-minute exchanges had been real, but incomplete. Wednesday afternoons, I started coming by the kitchen during prep. Not every Wednesday, but enough that Domenico stopped looking up with the particular expression of mild surprise that had marked my first few appearances, and started simply nodding and going back to his work. Sal, when he came on his Tuesday deliveries and I happened to be there, greeted me with a warmth that told me Clara had said something to him. He never mentioned it directly. He simply shook my hand with a grip that meant something it hadn't meant before. One Wednesday, Clara looked up from the prep counter and said, "Tell me about your brother." "Dante? How many do you have?" "One brother, one sister," I said. "Dante runs operations. Lucia runs a foundation for women's employment development in the garment district. She's better at her work than either of us are at ours." Clara set down her knife. "A foundation," she said. 11 years running it," I said. "Started with $100,000 and a contact list. She's built it into something that's placed over 3,000 women in sustainable employment." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Your mother must be extraordinary," she said. "She is," I said. "She's also in town next week. She wants to come to dinner." Clara looked at me. "Here? If that's all right." She studied me. "Your mother wants to eat at Romano's. She's been asking about it since I told her about the short rib. When did you tell her? About a month ago. Clara looked at the 1987 menu on the wall. The particular look she gave things she was thinking about seriously. Tuesday or Wednesday is better, she said. Quieter, less service pressure. I can actually pay attention to a table instead of managing the whole room. Wednesday, I said. She likes the idea of coming during the week. 7 o'clock, Clara said. Tell her the short rib is available on Wednesdays now. Since when is the short rib on Wednesdays? Since I decided it should be, she said, and went back to her prep. Rosa Marino came to Romano's on a Wednesday evening in October, and within 15 minutes had established a rapport with Clara Romano that I observed from my position across the table with a mixture of satisfaction and a mild sense of being peripheral to my own life. They talked about food the way two people who have devoted themselves to it talk about it, not as subject matter but as philosophy. About what it means to cook for someone, about the difference between feeding people and nourishing them, about the specific dignity of doing one thing well for a very long time. Your son, my mother said to Clara at some point, has been eating your short rib for 11 years. That's true, Clara said. He doesn't talk about food, my mother said. In 43 years, I've never heard him be genuinely moved by a meal. She looked at me with the expression she reserves for moments when she is about to say something I'd rather she didn't. He told me about this restaurant the way he tells me about things that matter to him, which is to say, briefly and with a specific quality in his voice that I have learned over the years to pay attention to. He tells you briefly about things that matter to him? Clara said. He tells me briefly about everything, my mother said. The difference is in the quality of the brevity. Clara looked at me with an expression that contained something warm and also something slightly amused. He's been sitting in my corner table for 11 years, she said. I had no idea he talked about the restaurant at all. He talked about the Barolo, my mother said, and the short rib, and then more recently about other things. What other things? Clara said. My mother looked at her with the full force of Rosa Marino's attention, which is considerable. You, she said simply. Clara held her gaze. Then she looked at me. Briefly, she said. I said with a specific quality. She almost laughed. The full laugh almost got out before she contained it. I filed this alongside the full smile. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over Clara's for a moment. Your father built something real, she said. You've kept it real. In this city, with everything pushing against that takes a particular kind of person. Clara looked at her. He built it for the neighborhood, she said. That was always the idea. Not the critics, not the press. The people who lived here and needed somewhere to eat well. My mother nodded. That's the right idea, she said. She said it the way she says things she's decided are true and doesn't intend to revisit. The evening went long. My mother ordered the short rib and then, after some consideration, ordered it again. She talked with Sal when he stopped by to say hello. They'd apparently been introduced at some point in the past that neither had mentioned to me. She talked with Domenico about Naples, where she had been twice, and where her own mother had been born. At 10 o'clock she stood to leave and kissed Clara on both cheeks with the specific warmth she reserves for people she's decided to add to her life. Next month, she said to Clara, I want to try the pasta. The pasta takes 30 minutes of your time in the kitchen, Clara said. I know, my mother said. I'll be there. In the car afterward, my mother sat in the back seat beside me and was quiet for a moment. Then she said, She's exactly right for you. I said, You decided that in 3 hours. I decided it the moment she looked at you and I said briefly, she said, the way she looked at you, and the way you looked back. I didn't say anything. She's not going to be easy, my mother said. People who build things like that never are. She has her own foundation and she's not going to move it for anyone. I know, I said. Good. My mother looked out at the city. The ones with foundations are the only ones worth building with. She was quiet for the rest of the ride. I thought about what she'd said for a long time after. The ones with foundations. Clara Romano, who had run her father's restaurant alone for 6 years, who had refused $3,000 a month 4 times and said it without flinching, who had rebuilt a Saturday service from nothing, and served the 1989 short rib on a specific Thursday because she'd decided the moment was right. She had the most solid foundation I'd ever encountered outside my own family. That was, I thought, exactly the point. In November, 6 weeks after the federal arrests, something happened that I hadn't planned for. Clara called me at 9 in the evening on a Tuesday. Her voice had a quality I hadn't heard in it before. Not distress, because distress wasn't a register she used, but a controlled weight that meant something had landed on her, and she was deciding how to carry it. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Can you come by?" I was there in 20 minutes. She was at the bar, wine glass in front of her, prep list on the counter face down. The restaurant was closed. The kitchen had been cleaned. The only light was the bar lights and the street coming through the front windows. She waited until I sat down. "I got a call today," she said, "from a reporter at the Daily Journal. She covers organized crime and federal prosecutions in the city." I waited. "She found out about the envelopes," Clara said, "the money that went to the 12 businesses. She found out that I was one of the targets of the ferry operation, and that the ferry arrests followed my situation. She's connecting things." "What does she want?" "She wants to know," Clara said, "if there's a story about the Marino family cleaning up a rival crew's mess and returning money to extortion victims as a form of," she paused, "community relations strategy." I looked at Clara. "What did you tell her?" "That I had nothing to say and she should contact the Marino Group's communications office." "Good." She looked at me. "But Luca," she paused, "I need to understand something. The envelopes, the money. Was that what she said? A strategy?" "No," I said. She held my gaze. "What was it then?" I told her what I'd told Mr. Park's wife when she refilled my tea, the accurate version. "It was the right thing to do," I said. "Those businesses lost money that they shouldn't have lost, to people who had no legitimate claim to it. The federal process might return it eventually, or it might not. I had the resources to address it now, so I did." She looked at her wine. "And the reporter?" "She'll write a story," I said. "I can't prevent that. The ferry arrests are public record. The territorial connection is something she'll piece together eventually, regardless of what either of us says." "The envelopes. She may not be able to source those," I said. "They went without documentation. The businesses who received them have no obligation to confirm them to press. Most of them won't. But some might." "Some might." Clara was quiet. "What does it mean for the restaurant?" she said. "If my name is in a story that connects Romanos to the Marino family." I looked at her. "I won't lie to you about this," I said. "It may produce some attention. Some customers will have opinions about it. Others won't care. The neighborhood already knows what it knows about who comes in on Thursdays and whose territory they're on. That's not new information." She held my gaze. "My father," she said. "He ran this restaurant for 30 years. He never did anything to compromise it. He never took money from anyone who would come back and want something. He kept it clean. I know he did. If my name is in a story," she said, "that connects this restaurant to Clara." I waited until she looked at me. "The story, if it's written, will be about the ferry operation and the federal arrests. It may mention that Romano's was one of the targeted businesses. That's true, and there's no damage in the truth of it. If the reporter can source the envelopes, it will say that an anonymous benefactor returned money to the victims. That's also true. Nothing she writes will say that Romano's is connected to organized crime," I said, "because it isn't. You have never done business with me or with anyone associated with me. You have never taken money from me. You have a man who comes in on Thursday evenings and eats the short rib. That's not a connection. That's a customer." She was quiet for a long moment. "Is that all you are?" she said. She said it without accusation, without theater, just the direct question. I looked at her. "No," I said, "but in every sense that a reporter could print, yes." She held my gaze. "You're asking me to draw a line," she said. "I'm telling you where the line already is," I said. "You drew it 11 years ago when you ran a clean restaurant on a complicated block and didn't ask questions about who sat at the corner table. You've kept drawing it every day since." She looked at her wine. "And if I want to keep drawing it," she said. "Then you keep drawing it," I said, "and I respect exactly where it is." She was quiet for a long moment. The reporter called back this afternoon, she said. She asked me specifically, "Is Luca Marino a regular customer at Romano's?" "What did you say?" Clara looked at me. I said, "Lots of people come to Romano's. I don't discuss individual customers." I held her gaze. "That's the right answer," I said. "I know it is," she said. "I just needed to say it out loud to you." She picked up her wine. "Thursday?" she said. "Thursday," I said. She held up the glass. I picked up the one she'd poured without asking when she heard my car. We sat at the bar in the quiet of a closed restaurant and drank wine while the city moved past on the other side of the glass. And I thought about what she'd said. The line. She'd drawn it 11 years ago and she was drawing it still. Not because she was afraid, because she understood the difference between what could be compromised and what couldn't. And she'd decided which category the restaurant was in, and she wasn't revisiting it. The restaurant was the foundation. The foundation didn't move. I had the specific respect for that, the kind that comes from having built something yourself and understanding what it costs. Around 11 o'clock, she said, "Tell me something, anything." "What is it like," she said, "when you find the right version of something? The version you want to build on? How do you know?" I thought about it. "It has a weight to it," I said, "a specific texture, like the moment to act. You know it when it arrives because everything before it has been building toward it without you knowing it was building." She looked at me. "And do you know it now?" she said. I held her gaze. "I've known it," I said, "since a Saturday morning in your kitchen when you looked at a service order and started solving problems before I finished describing them." She was quiet. Then she said, "I've known it since you gave me a card years ago in case the fish wholesaler situation happened again. Not because of the card," she looked at me, "because of the way you said it. Like you meant both things at once." "Both things," I said. "The fish wholesaler," she said, "and whatever came after it." "Yes." She set down her wine. "I'm not easy," she said. "You should know that. My mother told me the same thing." "Your mother is very direct." "She is," I said. "It's genetic." Clara looked at me for a long moment. Then she picked up the prep list that had been sitting face down on the bar and turned it over and started reviewing it. The way she moved from one thing to the next, fully present in each, fully present in the next. I stayed at the bar while she worked. Neither of us needed to say what the evening had settled into. It was simply there, the way the restaurant was there, the way the short rib was there every Thursday, not requiring explanation, simply real. The city outside kept moving. Inside Romano's on a Tuesday night in November it was very quiet, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The reporter's story ran the following Friday. It was a good piece. She was thorough and the facts were accurate. The ferry operation, the 14 businesses, the 6 months of extortion, the 7 arrests. The story described the territorial overlap with the Marino Group's area, and noted that the arrests had followed a period in which the extortion had apparently been escalating. It did not name me directly in connection with the businesses who received the envelopes. It said that sources in the affected business community indicated that some victims had received anonymous restitution following the arrests, and that the origin of the restitution was unclear. 2 businesses confirmed the envelopes. 10 did not comment. Romano's was named as one of the 14 targeted businesses. Clara Romano was quoted saying, "We've been part of this neighborhood for 38 years. People tried to change that and they didn't succeed. We're still here." That was it. It was, I thought, exactly the right quote. I sent her a message Friday morning when the story ran online. "Good quote," I said. She sent back, "Come Thursday." I was already planning to. One evening in December, Rosa Marino came back to Romano's as she'd promised. 30 minutes in Clara's kitchen, learning the pasta. My mother arrived with the specific energy she brings to things she intends to learn fully, which is considerable. She and Clara stood at the prep counter and Clara talked through the pasta the way she talked through everything. Precise, clear, without condescension, trusting her student to receive what was being taught. My mother made her first batch of Clara's pasta with the concentration of someone who understands that new skills require new attention. Then she tasted it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said to Clara, "I was right about you." Clara looked at her. "You were right about what?" My mother smiled. "That you're exactly right," she said. She said it the way she says things she's decided are true. Clara looked at me across the kitchen. I looked back. The pasta was extraordinary, as I'd known it would be. Some things are worth building slowly. My father built this restaurant for 30 years, Clara had told me once. Some things are worth building slowly, my own father had told me, a long time ago, before I was old enough to understand what he meant. I was beginning to understand it now. Thursday evenings, for 11 years, I had come to the corner table and eaten the short rib, and had 4 minutes of conversation, and left a generous tip, and gone back to the version of my life that required me to be something specific. And then a September evening when 3 men walked into a room where I was trying to simply be present, and something shifted. And 11 years of Thursday evenings turned out to have been building towards something I hadn't named yet, because the moment to name it hadn't arrived. It had arrived. The right version. The one built on everything that came before it. The foundation that didn't move. "That's enough," Carmine Romano had said, every evening after the last table left. Another day where someone ate well. Yes, that's enough. If this story reached you, hit the like button and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, what's the one place in your life where you can simply be present, without having to be anything in particular? Tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this reaches.